Have you ever wondered what customs the Germanic tribes practiced and whether they had any connection to the concept of democracy we use today? This topic was suggested by one of our subscribers under our latest post. I'd like to thank them for their engagement and contribution to our community, and I encourage everyone, please propose new topics. Perhaps yours will be featured in one of our next videos. But now, let's get down to business. To understand the entities historically classified as Germanic tribes, one must look beyond the idea of a unified nation that instead visualize a diverse collection of non-literate, small-scale societies. Inhabiting the temperate region of Europe known to the Romans as Magna Germania, stretching from the Rhine and Danube rivers toward the Vistula, these groups functioned primarily as independent tribes rather than a single super-regional population. In fact, the label Germanic was largely a categorical construct created by outside observers, such as Julius Caesar and Publius Cornelius Tacitus. Internally, these societies were fundamentally organized around clans and kindred groups, which served as the core units of social and political identity for tribes such as the Goths, Franks, Saxons, Suebi, Alemanni, and Lombards. Much of our understanding of this era relies on the work of Tacitus, a Roman senator whose treatise Germania remains the single most important literary source regarding the culture, laws, and habits of these early peoples. Tacitus describes a society that was highly stratified, organized into a clear hierarchy of aristocracy, free citizenry, and unfree laborers. At the apex stood the nobilitas, whose authority rested on lineage. This class produced the kings, who were chosen from noble families based on their sacral status. Rather than ruling as absolute monarchs, these kings acted as spiritual figureheads who led through persuasion, ritual authority, and counsel. Supporting the king was a council of elite nobles known as the leading men. This body handled minor administrative affairs and exercised significant power by controlling the agenda of the General Assembly. Beneath the aristocracy stood the ingenui, the free warrior class that formed the political and military backbone of the tribe. Membership in this class was not automatic. A man only became a full citizen after a public rite of passage, in which he was presented with a shield and lance before the assembly. Distinct from the hereditary kings, the commanders emerged from this warrior class. These leaders were elected based on merit and proven valor, earning loyalty by leading from the front rather than through inherited authority. It is worth noting, as Tacitus does, that governance varied widely. Not all tribes had kings, and some were more egalitarian or led solely by elected chiefs. Outside this martial hierarchy existed the unfree population. Unlike Roman chattel slaves, Germanic slaves functioned more like dependent tenants, often living in their own households and paying rent in crops or livestock. While freedmen generally held little political power, those in monarchic systems could occasionally rise to high administrative positions, illustrating that proximity to a king could sometimes outweigh humble birth. This social stratification directly informed a system of participatory self-governance that operated on a king and council template, establishing a primitive form of checks and balances. The relationship between the leaders and the people has been likened to a theatre production. The noble council acted as the directors choosing the script, but the freemen warriors served as the audience whose reaction determined whether the show would continue. This dynamic played out in the Assembly of Warriors, which included all free male citizens. Meeting regularly at the new or full moon to debate major affairs, such as war, peace, and capital crimes, the assembly made decisions not by secret ballot, but by acclamation. If the warriors disliked a proposal, they shouted their dissent. If they approved, they clashed their spears together. Within this system, leadership roles remained explicitly divided. The kings provided spiritual stability and peacetime counsel through noble birth, while the commanders provided dynamic action during war through military prowess. The preference for meritocratic commanders was rooted in a culture defined by strict martial values. This warrior code found its purest expression in the comitatus, a standing retinue of young warriors bound by a sacred oath to a commander. Loyalty within this unit was absolute. The chief fought for victory, while the retinue fought for the chief. It was considered a lifelong infamy to survive a battle in which one's commander had fallen. The most potent symbol of this honor culture was the shield. To throw away one's shield in battle was the supreme disgrace, barring a man from both religious rights and participation in the assembly. While war defined their public life, the domestic sphere was governed by pastoral and agricultural needs. The economy was primarily pastoral, with cattle serving as the most prized form of wealth, though Roman encroachment eventually forced a transition towards sedentary agriculture involving wheat and barley. Socially, the tribes were distinct from many contemporary cultures in their practice of strict monogamy. Marriage was viewed pragmatically as a partnership in toils and dangers, symbolized during the wedding by the exchange of practical gifts like oxen, horses, and weapons rather than luxuries. This sense of communal obligation extended to hospitality. It was considered a sin to refuse shelter to any human being, and hosts were expected to guide guests to the next house if their own supplies were exhausted. Just as social norms governed the home, unwritten customary law governed the tribe. The legal system emphasized the personality of the law, meaning individuals were judged according to their own tribal custom. To maintain order, the tribes preferred restitution over punishment. Instead of perpetuating private blood feuds, they utilized wergeld, a set price paid in livestock or gold for crimes like homicide. This provided compensation to victims' kin while paying a fine to the community to restore the peace. Ultimately, these legal, social, and political structures were grounded in a deep spiritual connection to the natural world. Religious practices centered on nature, with worship taking place in sacred groves rather than man-made temples, as they believed it beneath the dignity of God to be confined by walls. The will of the gods was sought through divination, often by interpreting marked fruit tree twigs or the behavior of sacred white horses, ensuring that both the decisions of the council and the actions of the warrior remained in alignment with the divine. Ancient Germanic societies utilized a governance system that shared power between leaders and an assembly of free warriors. While this king and council model was not a modern democracy, it emphasized participation and placed strict limits on leadership power. These customs are often described as democratic because several aspects resemble elements of the democratic tradition. Ultimate authority. The assembly of warriors held the final say, meaning leaders could not declare war or make laws without the direct public consent of the citizenry. Persuasion over force. Kings were forced to rule through persuasion as they required the visible approval of clashing spears to enact their agendas. Meritocracy. The society prioritized participation, utilizing elections to choose military commanders based on skill. Participatory justice. Commoners actively assisted elected magistrates in administering justice. However, we must be careful not to overstate the case. This was a system limited to the warrior class, excluding women, slaves, and non-free men, making it more oligarchic than egalitarian by modern standards. While these assemblies preserved ideas of consensus that influenced medieval bodies like the Anglo-Saxon Witan or a Norse thing, historians generally view the Germanic tradition as just one influence among many, alongside Greek, Roman and Christian ideas that eventually shaped modern representative democracy.